Have you ever wondered when love turns into obsession? Where is the line between love and madness? Or maybe the people who become stalkers were never truly in love at all. Maybe it's simply insanity. Let's take a look at a few stories before we try to answer these questions ourselves. Our first story looks like a movie, but don't forget while listening, it's a real story. Around a year and a half ago, I started getting these creepy notes slid under the door of my dorm room. Call up campus police, and they say that while the content is a bit off, there's nothing threatening about telling someone they're pretty and mentioning that they see them around a lot. 18-year-old me agrees, mostly out of stupidity, and goes back to my first year of college life. The notes don't stop, but they don't really escalate either. For unrelated reasons, my roommate goes nuts and kicks me out of the room, and I find myself in a new area of the dorms for the rest of the semester. The notes stop, and I'm happy. Easy peasy. I come back the next year, and within 3 weeks I'm getting notes again. They're the same sort of content, and I report it to the police and try to continue with my life. Campus police doesn't do anything, and I start descending into paranoia. You know, normal I'm being stalked behavior. The notes escalate. I start being referred to as property. The notes forbid me from speaking to my friends. I'm getting scared, and instead of helping me, campus police tells me that until this person's ID'd, there's nothing they can do. Fast forward a few months. I'm out in the evening and someone tries to grab me. I'm severely hard of hearing, so I don't hear them approach, and I scream. The person runs away, and I'm so stunned that I don't really see them. Fast forward another month. I've left my room to grab something from the library, literally 100 meters from the building. On the way back, I'm tackled, and the guy tries to I scream. He punches me. I knee him in the chest. He rolls off me and I run. I run faster than I've ever run. Now you might be thinking that's the crazy part, but hold on. That's still coming. I go to campus police and am told not to tell anyone what happened, under the guise that it'll stress out the other students if they know what happened. The college then starts trying to cover up the case. Our second story about 50-years-old man who was stalking 17-years-old girl. When I was a senior in high school, I was stalked by a customer who would come into my work. He was a man in his 50s, and I was a 17-year-old girl. It started off fine. He was a regular customer and a little bit odd, and my coworkers didn't care for him that much. I always tried to be nice though, and I guess this made him take a liking to me. At my workplace, one service we have is making copies. He would come into the store at least 4 days a week and request copies of writing he'd done to be made. This wouldn't be weird if he didn't only ask for 2 copies, one for himself and one for me. If I was not working, he would leave a copy of his poetry or writing with a coworker to give to me. I thought it was sweet at first, and he was just trying to be nice and share his work with me, as I am quite fond of poetry. However, his behavior grew more advanced. He started to refuse service from anyone except me, and if I was not working, he would ask when I would be back, and then leave. Over the course of a few weeks, he started getting stranger. He began bringing me in boxes of chocolates that he just happened to accidentally pick up too many of. This happened 4 or 5 times. My best friend happened to work at the same place as me, and one day when we were working together, we were casually discussing our weekend plans and what we should do. My stalker was in the store at this time, and I was making his copies as I talked to my friend. He was the only person in the store, and he pretended he was browsing our merchandise, but he must have been listening in. The weekend comes around, and my friend and I had planned to grab coffee together at this local cafe, which we had been discussing at work. We show up at the cafe, and lo and behold, who is there? My stalker. I chalked it up to a coincidence and said hello politely. He didn't appear to be drinking or eating anything, and had been sitting at a counter near the front door. I am pretty positive he was just waiting for me to show up. My friend and I ended up getting our coffee to go and leaving. We went across the street to a store, and I watched from the window as he left almost immediately after we did. The next day at work, I told my coworkers about it, and they thought it was odd, but none of us really thought anything of it. I only had to work a morning shift that day, and had plans to grab lunch with my best friend at our favorite restaurant. I am pretty sure my stalker waited outside of my work until I left and followed me to the restaurant, because I had only been there long enough to set my purse down, and he walked through the door. I pretended I didn't see him and sat with my friend. I alerted her to his presence and sat with my back to him. She told me he kept looking at me repeatedly. When we were almost done with our meal, he gets up from his table and walks towards the bathrooms, passing our table in the process. He acts surprised and is all, 2 a.m. Tuesday. I didn't see you there. This is so funny that we've run into each other again. I laugh nervously and he goes back to his table, only to return once more. He tells me he has something to give me and hands me a poetry book by him. I say thank you and that he really didn't have to do that. He says it's fine and he just had an extra in his bag, and when he saw me he figured I might want it. He then left the restaurant. I open it and he has written in black calligraphy on the inside cover. It is a message to me saying something along the lines of that he was praying for me. I decide it was sweet, but feel a little creeped out. The next day at work I tell my coworkers, and they begin to feel wary about the situation. They are all much older than me, with the exception of my best friend. They tell my boss, and having dealt with previous creepy customers in the past, he asked my coworkers to hide me in the back room when they saw him coming, and to deal with him themselves. This angered the stalker, and he would demand to know when I would be working next. When he realized I wasn't going to be at work, he didn't come in the rest of the week. That weekend, I was out to lunch again with a different friend, who shows up minutes after I do. My stalker. My friend and I order our food and go find a seat. I tell her about the situation. The stalker hasn't ordered any food and is just sitting at a table, watching me. We go almost the entire meal without him confronting me. However, right as we have finished eating and are about to leave, he goes and orders food and once again pretends he hasn't seen me and fakes casually running into me. He asks if he can sit with us. My friend explains we are about to leave. He grows upset and says it won't take long. He spends the entire time asking me what I thought of his book. I hadn't had time to look at it yet, and I decide to be honest and tell him. He gets very upset. I text an SOS to a friend to call me, and I pretend she is my mom and needs me to come home. The next time I work, I tell my boss about the latest run-in, and they grow concerned. My boss decides to transfer me to a different store for a while. He owned 3, and we all took turns at the different stores, but sometimes he would leave employees at a specific one for a bit. My stalker comes into my old store and asks where I am. A new employee foolishly tells him that I have been transferred, and he asks which store I'm at. Luckily, the employee didn't know. This didn't stop my stalker, however. He decided to drive to every single franchise of my store within 45 minutes of the first store. Eventually, he drove to the 3rd store my boss owns and asked if I was there. This freaked out my other coworkers, and they called my boss and told me that some man was looking for me. My boss proceeded to call the manager at the new store and told him to hide me immediately because the stalker was probably on his way. They hid me in a spacious closet in the back room because our back room was slightly exposed. Sure enough, my stalker shows up and asks for me by name. They say I'm not there, and he gets upset and says he knows I'm there. We assume he saw my car. They insist that I am not and ask if he needs any help. He says no, but proceeds to pretend to browse our limited merchandise for about 20 minutes, waiting for me to come out. When he finally left, I was terrified. I didn't see my stalker for quite some time. I was thinking he forgot about me, and we all felt that things were back to normal. I went back to my old store and was working one day after school. It was a slow shift, so it was just me and another coworker. My coworker had to go to the bathroom, so it was just myself in the front room. My stalker walks in the door shortly after my coworker heads to the back. He acts very excited to see me and is carrying a bunch of stuff in his hands. My workplace also ships things, so I assumed he needed me to pack and ship the items. I asked if this was the case, and he replies, "Oh no, these are for you. It's a present." He had brought me a really strange collection of items. The first was a wooden carrier type thing. Inside of it was a velvet bag that held 3 multicolored huge gaudy rings, 3 women's scarves, and a faceless odd doll made out of twine and woven basket material. The second gift was a wooden scroll-top CD case filled with about 50 CDs. All of them were terrible folk/nature sound albums and odd live renditions of songs from some radio show from a different state. The third part of his gift was a giant plastic bag filled with about 20 or so more of these CDs, as well as 14 mixed CDs he had made for me. I had no idea how to react. He claimed this was a graduation present for me. I don't know how he knew I had just graduated that weekend. When my coworker left the bathroom and came back to the front, my stalker immediately said goodbye and left the store. I was terrified and had no idea what to do with all of the stuff. It was just so odd. I ended up keeping the scroll-top CD case because it was actually pretty cool, but everything else was tossed in the garbage. I felt a little bad about that, but he had gone too far, and I was quite scared. My boss moved me to a different store for the rest of the summer, where I was never left alone again, and I always had at least 2 male coworkers with me. I eventually went to college, and I have not seen my stalker since. Our third story shows what obsession and sick love mean. I had a stalker ex when I was 19. I had broken up with a guy I'd been in a relationship with for 2 years, and it really wasn't working anymore. He was immature, just wanted to sit around and play WoW, didn't have a job, was failing out of college. He went to the same college as me so we could be together. So I dumped him. It started off as regular annoying obsessed ex shit. He'd message me endlessly on every available avenue and would call and text me constantly. One time I got 300 plus texts from him in one day. He'd wait for me outside of my classes. I knew for a fact that he was even skipping his own classes so he could catch me on campus. He'd listen to my radio show, derive messages from the songs I played and the tone of my voice, and use this as proof that I still loved him. He convinced himself I needed him, and that I was only hurting myself. I had to have friends walk with me everywhere I went on campus, because he'd always be around and would try to corner me so we could talk about my choices. I'd come back to my dorm room, and he'd be waiting outside the door. He sent me emails, Facebook messages. I'd ignore him, and then he'd call my dorm phone. And when I took that off the hook, he'd come to my door. He'd track down my roommate or my other friends on campus and try to get information out of them about whether I'd be going home that weekend, what my plans were, if I had been hanging around other guys at all. But honestly, all this was easy enough to deal with, until I started seeing someone else a month or 2 later. Well, he totally flipped out. Started posting photos of me online and on campus with tags like slut and cheat. I had not cheated on him. Would print out copies of our Facebook conversations, or was it AIM? I can't remember, and literally distribute them to people to prove what a whore I was. He sought out my new friends I'd made to try to turn them against me. He made up outright lies and told them to anyone who would listen. The same stalking patterns continued, except now it was abusive. He didn't want to talk anymore. He just wanted to yell at me and give me angry glares. He'd follow me everywhere and told all his friends he was going to hurt me, so I finally went to the campus police, which are real police officers from the nearby city, and they basically told me there was nothing they could do, and I got the distinct impression they didn't take me seriously at all, and just chalked it up to young lovers having a spat. I remember the cop I reported it to only half listening to me, because SpongeBob was on in the station and he was mostly interested in that. I believe his advice was just ignore him, and that there was nothing they could do because he hadn't done anything illegal, yet. Well, long story short, too late. He ended up actually hurting me. He beat the crap out of me and tried to strangle me to death one night in a dorm room. Of course, no charges were pressed, because the cops couldn't tell who started it, despite the fact that I had a busted lip, black eye, strangulation, bruising, etc. So if I wanted to press charges for assault, they'd be forced to arrest me as well. The judicial process that followed, since the assault had occurred on campus, was an absolute fucking joke. I wish I had known then what I know now, because I would have owned that entire campus. The university threatened to expel us both, but I pressed for a trial. The cop who had been called when the assault happened actually called me on my cell phone and yelled at me for being so ungrateful to him for not arresting me, because I was trying to get out of my punishment from the school. He was so pissed that I would try to get out of this punishment he felt I deserved. It could have been so much worse, because I could be in jail right now if it weren't for his benevolence, etc. I was just crying and crying, but I was too scared to hang up on him because I was 19 and he was a cop, and I had never dealt with cops before. At the judicial proceedings, to which I brought loads of evidence of his harassment, some old-ass dude on the judicial board just told me I had clearly been too stupid to report it to the police earlier. When I said I had and they said there was nothing they could do, he just laughed at me. In the end, both me and my ex were both suspended / persona non grata from the campus for a semester, and I had to undergo a psych evaluation to make sure I would not be a danger to myself or others before they would agree to let me back after the semester was up. Of course, he continued to stalk me after this, driving by my house, calling and hanging up, etc. His mother and sister would call and scream obscenities at me about how I had ruined his life. He started showing up at the place I worked that summer, a pool, basically. So after the third or fourth time of him glaring at me from varying crowds, I called security, explained the situation, and he was escorted out. More harassment from mom and sister, so I finally took his ass to court and got a restraining order, where his mother chased me down in the hallway and threatened to sue me for defamation. The whole thing was pretty terrible. 2007 was the worst year of my life. And the last story for today about the male hairdresser stalks BFF, ends up getting arrested for attempting to kidnap her. Jailed for that, then child porn. I'm using my BFF story because mine were never horribly crazy like hers, and it wasn't anyone she was dating. So she had been single for like 2, almost 3 years, where she met this nice guy hairdresser. He was amazing and knew how to deal with her insane hair. It always came out perfect. It all started when she donated it. He called her to let her know after straightening it. It came out to more than she needed to donate. He had to have looked up her number from the computers when they check you in. Turns out he said he was going to another shop, a more mom and pop place, since he's not into big corporate places like where he was working. So since he did such a great job, we kept going to him. Well, I was all for her getting some and having fun, but she was always hesitant. If he was coming over, I would have to be there too. But eventually they were fucking a few times. But he was a little odd, but hey, who isn't? Well, then they stopped talking for like 3 months, until he showed up on her doorstep at 3 a.m. on Christmas morning. She didn't let him in but talked to him at the door of her complex. She just felt something was off. Then she started talking to her now fiancé, and told him they would have to stop the booty calls. He kept texting her about how even if she got pregnant with another dude's kids, he would still bang her because he knows it's not his. Saying some really sick stuff. She was reading me everything and she was being too polite. I told her she needed to tell him to fuck off and leave her alone. She wants nothing to do with him and that's it. She ended up emailing her uncle, who is a Chicago judge, because the stuff he was saying was getting worse and worse. Even from another country, he had a restraining order ready for her to sign in the morning. That's when shit hit the fan. He showed up at her place when she got home and he was pounding on her car window. He wanted to discuss it and wouldn't leave. She even told him she was calling the police and he still stayed. Cops came, told him he's not allowed to be there. That's what the restraining order is for, and they arrested him. Then they had to go to court for that arrest. Well, some random lady came up to my friend and said how right so-and-so was. She's beautiful. Turns out it was his mother. She was on the stand saying how her son was a good boy, and he lost his job because he was served the restraining order at work, and now he has to sell his condo and move in with her over an hour away. Well, they kept the restraining order even though he was moving. Turns out months later he hadn't moved. It was all lies. He was still driving by her place every day. One day she caught him. She was leaving with her nephew and then boyfriend to go somewhere. He freaked and called the social worker they had and asked if she had a kid. It was none of his business and she didn't want him knowing anything. She just said it was a friend's kid. But clearly he admitted to trying to contact her again and got in trouble. He was brought in and they asked who she was to him, and he would only repeat that she is mine. Then shit really hit the fan. His roommate noticed he was really acting off. He knew about the restraining order and called the cops about him. The cops immediately came over with the social worker and they searched his house and car. Turns out for hating big corporations, he was shopping at Menards and had bags in his trunk with rope, zip ties, duct tape, pretty much a rape kit. He was planning on kidnapping her, and who knows, from then on. He was arrested right then and there. He answered everything with, "She is mine." They took his computers and found pictures of her on there from Facebook, and also found child porn. So he was not allowed to post bail and stayed in jail for a while. Then one day she got a call from the social worker saying he was out on some loophole he had found. But before she got the call from her lady, she got a text from him saying, "What's up, punk?" I guess the lady had been trying to get a hold of her but didn't, and she had no clue he had been out for weeks prior. She just told the lady that she's moving and to let him know, and wouldn't even give her new address to the social worker. This was about 2 years ago now. Luckily, we've had no more contact from him or have run into him. But man, it was a fucked up year dealing with this shit. What's your thoughts? Which story touched you the most, or maybe terrified you? Share with us and subscribe. You will find here a lot of interesting and creepy stories.